All right. Well, that leads us to Ahsoka, and Will, your Twitter
Yeah.
caused me to go into this episode with very high expectations. Very high. And it wasn't just you, it was you and everyone else because I kept thinking about how last week you told me you're like, man, everyone was talking about that episode. And so when you sat down and watched it, you were like, what is everyone talking about?
Yeah.
I get what everyone's talking about with this episode, episode 5, The Shadow Warrior. I understand it, and I understand why, in particular, Rebels fans are like, oh my God, this is my shit. But I watched it. It's not a bad episode. I just also didn't walk away being utterly like shocked or moved or I was just like, okay, we're moving along. I get it. I liked all of the Anakin and Ahsoka stuff.
Hmm.
I like that we ended up in a whale by the end of the episode. I don't know why. That was just pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it felt like the episode, and I know we've been making some jokes about how these episodes are so short. This one, this is the first one, and I know it was a longer episode, but this one felt long for me, where I'm like, hey, we're still here, and now we're still here. Can we move this along?
Yeah. See, I had the complete opposite. It felt cinematic in a sense, as far as like, and to your, and if folks hadn't seen my Twitter, I used the Homelander perfect. So, yeah. So I'm sure whenever you saw that, you're like, oh, wow, because that was, compared to, as you mentioned, the last week, I was just like, what am I missing that other people are seeing with episode 4 that I'm missing, versus why I felt episode 5 was so, where it did move me. Not only because it felt like a payoff for being someone who had watched the animated shows, but also as you noted, Anakin and Ahsoka's fights, for example. And yes, I mean, Hayden Christensen, I mean, clearly, I think he even saw somewhere where I don't know if it was true or not, where he jokes about, yeah, every now and then he'll like pick up a stick or whatever and pretend to do his lightsaber fights again. Because, yes, I mean, the saber fights and everything, why it worked, it wasn't so much the saber fights itself. The thing that makes Star Wars lightsaber battles memorable is the emotion behind it. When we think back to Return of the Jedi, it was the emotion. Granted, it wasn't as much acrobatics and all the stuff that we, see now, and even in Empire Strikes Back, and also in Revenge of the Sith. The commonality with all those epic lightsaber battles, and even in Obi-Wan, why that episode sticks out, was the emotions behind what was going on there. And so that was what was one of those, through the things that helped pay off for me in this episode right out the get, whenever Anakin gave Ahsoka the choice, live or die.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, so it was that. And then, of course, as I noted, yes, it was a payoff for the lore. Last week we talked about, it would be nice to get a name drop from a legacy character, and we got one. And
Mm-hmm.
it was in a good context, because you called me out on like that, about having like legacy characters show up, and also I was appreciative of how to use Leia in this episode.
Yeah.
And then as for me as a Rebels fan, I've been looking for, even after we talked about this in our reviews, when are we going to hear Kanan's name? And we finally heard Kanan's name. And you are and so I like the way you set things up, because so whenever you heard that, I mean, granted, you're familiar with it because you listen to podcasts and all that stuff, but many live action fans only probably had the same reaction that Carson Teva had, which was like, okay, It didn't move them beyond like, oh, okay, cool. There's another Jedi. So what? But for me, I kid you not, whenever I heard Kanan's name, I literally threw my arms up in the air. I was like, yes, finally, we got it. So, I mean, those were the things that on the front end of the episode felt so perfect, and then as you noted on the back end, just again when she's Ahsoka the White, and the things that happen there. We could go into a little bit more detail, but those are the things, at least just top lines, as far as why this episode really worked for me this week.
So, am I, for some reason, I had it in my mind that Freddie Prinze Jr. voiced Ezra. Is that not right?
No. He voiced Kanan. Yeah.
Okay. Who voiced Ezra?
Oh gosh, I can't remember the actor's name right now, but it's not the same actor who's doing it in live action.
Right, I know that.
Yeah.
And Sam Witwer voiced someone else, like two different people.
Yeah, he did in Rebels. He did Darth Maul.
Right.
And then in Clone Wars, he did one of you've probably heard a lot of people on the podcast, various podcasts talking about the Mortis, the three. The father, son, and the daughter, as far as the three archetypes for the Force. He did one of the voices there. I think the brother. Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to piece together, and I can picture the face, but I don't know the name because I don't think he's a well-known actor. But yeah, okay. That makes a little bbit more sense because I don't know. I was just, for some reason, everyone always talked about Ezra and Freddie Prinze.
Yeah.
and I'm sure I heard the name Kanan, but I was just like putting those two together. Well, okay. So where do you want to go with detail? Like
Yeah.
You're more geeking out about this episode than I am.
Yeah.
So you need to do a bit more of a leading here, bud.
Well, we could just go chronologically through the episode because I think it really does build, and it does from the moment when where we end last week and then we start this week with Hera and Huang finding Sabine's helmet, and that moment where again getting back to Huang been around. The things that worked in episode 4, as far as like telling them to stay together, and of course when they go apart, bad things happen, and that's that's kind of funny, and I was thinking about that as watching episode. It's like, well, come to think of it, way back when Obi-Wan and Anakin separated, things went bad, so this is the Padawan master sticking together thing. Something that's a kind of a through line, through Star Wars. So, and also just, so that the depth of that moment of him, the emotion there, looking at Sabine's helmet, knowing that, they don't know that, at that moment, they didn't know that she went willingly with Balin. She thought they thought both, and given that both of them were gone, Hera and Huang thought they were both captured and, taken off.
Dead. They thought they were both dead.
Yeah. Captured or dead. Yep. So, yeah. So, so I thought that was, so we get that. And then of course we do transition to I guess, there's been a lot of debate whether or not Ahsoka was in the world between worlds or was this all in her head. I kind of fall in it that I think they were in some part of the world between worlds.
Okay.
Why? Because I think Jason being able to hear the lightsabers and stuff I think since he's attuned to the Force, to me that makes it more likely that there was a portal somewhere on the Ceton, or Cetos, I think is how they pronounce it in the show, and she fell and Ahsoka fell into that found in that portal and fell into it. But there was still enough of the gateway that was still open that since he was attuned to the Force, he was able to hear her and the lightsabers and stuff fighting in the background. So that's why I think that was the case. And I think Anakin was sort of I think he was like partially was a part of the cosmic force. But he still had a link to the living force as far as being able to that you could still hear the lightsabers and stuff fighting whenever they were fighting. But so that's why I think that was the case in this particular situation, and not necessarily her being stuck in the ocean in her mind, and playing out there, her feelings of guilt and loss and things we've talked about before, with her leaving the order and leaving Anakin and having that guilt of like, if I had been there, maybe I could have prevented all this stuff from happening.
How what is the timeline in terms of her leaving Anakin and him turning into Darth Vader?
So it was that was the right after the siege of Mandalore, the fight that was one of the things that she fell through in this episode, and that was right at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, because when Anakin notes that he didn't recognize that battle, it was because he was off trying to save the Chancellor Palpatine that we saw at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith.
So, okay, interesting. And this isn't the first time that we've heard. Well, in live action, this isn't the first time we've heard about the Siege of Mandalore. Thinking about the same thing that they mentioned in Mandalorian, or is that a different?
So the one in Mandalorian is that's the different battle. That was where the Empire Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Mandalorian's just always fighting, always fighing.
Yeah, but the Siege of Mandalore, so Darth Maul was actually, and the reason why, if you notice, Maul's horns were on the Mandalorian armor. He had, at that point, he had gotten control of the Darksaber. So he was actually, so that's why the Mandalorian armor had the Darth Maul horns on it, because he was in charge of the sect of the Mandalore. Which, funny little thing is, those same horns are on the and probably why people were like trying to make the armorer and the show Mandalorian, thinking since she was she's a descendant of those that the knights, I can't remember the name of the Mando sect, the Dinjarin sect. But that sect is sort of the split, was the offshoot of the Darth Maul's people during his reign of Mandalore. So it was like all these things are like starting to connect in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the cool thing about the scenes with the getting to when they were in the World Between Worlds, I mean, the very first one, was again a payoff for folks from the Clone Wars show, because that was, and also Rebels as well, because they were on Ryloth, which is Hera's home planet. And there was the first battle, and was her whenever when he's like, I'm gonna teach you the lesson, and I love the way they framed that, where she, because Ahsoka and Anakin at that moment, whenever we saw them first together there in the World Between Worlds, skill wise they're equal, and we saw that in the fight. And that's why Anakin was like, oh, you still have one more lesson to learn. And that's, and of course he takes her feet out from under her and she falls through. And then we first see this shortly after they first met, and some of their first battles together there in the Clone Wars, there on Ryloth. And I love that framing. I mean, with, whenever, he goes off, and, of course everybody's, seen the moment now where, with the Darth Vader, and, in the smoke and all that kind of stuff. So it was, there was, as I said, there was a lot of payoffs in this episode that I think really, if this were like the season finale, I'd be happy. I'd be like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah, even though we didn't see
I haven't
yeah.
seen Thrawn yet, but still, I
No.
would be like, okay, I'm good. I can, yeah. Because I mean, there were a lot of things in this episode that could easily have, well, this is a 5 or 6 episode like show. You could have ended the season right here, and then have the next season 2 of Ahsoka, being able to actually get to the next galaxy and stuff. But
Yeah. Can you imagine a 5-episode show?
oh, I know that would, yeah,
That'd be
yeah.
really weird. So what else? Anything else about the battles between Anakin and Ahsoka?
I mean, the battles, really just, I think, get to the heart of her really getting over that guilt and really, and also like, the key line that, Anakin, one of the things he says, he notes like, you're me, I'm training you, you're part of a legacy. And, and I also think back to last week's episode with Balin when he's like, your legacy is one of death and destruction. And so now, so I think those battles were just really like, truly is the crucible with, Ahsoka going through this, seeing this period, so that when we finally get to the moment there, when they back into on the platform in the World Between Worlds, and they had their last confrontation, when we hear the breathing of Vader, and after clearly he's gone through the chain transformation there due to his injuries from Mustafa, and here and they face off, and she does and then she does what Luke does. She's like, I'm not going to fight you. She tosses the saber away, and she finally learns that lesson, and she finally feels that all that guilt and everything is finally released. And so it really, I know a lot of folks were like, why is Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka so somber and stiff and all that kind of stuff? But when you look at it now in full context, it's like that was not only a director choice, but it was a story choice, because you had to have that, her being, fearful of teaching Sabine, fearful of like, when we first see her refusing to teach Grogu, all the, she's so worried that that if she is going to be teaches someone, the only thing that she's learned how to be as far as a Jedi, has been a Jedi soldier. But as we know, Jedi originally were peacekeepers, and they weren't supposed to be soldiers, but were manipulated into becoming soldiers so that Palpatine could rise to take over the Republic. So so when we do get all that, and she finally had that final confrontation with Anakin, and she's like, I'm not going, it's like, Luke, I'm not going to strike you down, I'm just going to surrender. And they both like cool off, and they're no longer Anakin's looking like himself again. Ahsoka had the moment there where she did have the Sith yellow eyes, but then she backed off when she came to, and back into the normal world, or I guess back on the planet. She granted, everybody's calling her Ahsoka the White. I think it was just a convenience. It's probably just like what was there, but I mean, visually, it was just a visual thing to show, like, okay, now lighter. But also, if you notice how before everything was like very dark and dank in the filming, but then after she went through all that stuff, the lighting and everything in the episode was completely different and brighter and everything too. So from a cinematography standpoint, not only was her clothes different, but also her also the lighting and the sets and everything else as well. So, that was, I think, one of the cool things about this episode, and why it just, again, for me, it just works super, super well.
Right. So she's completed her training.
Yeah.
Which releases all the guilt she had from leaving Anakin to begin with, as well as all of the imposter syndrome that I picked up on in the previous episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So that's why she didn't immediately start to curse out Sabine
Yeah.
when she realized. I mean, I saw something in her eyes, but I'm just like, girl, you better control that anger because you know. And then yes, I do want you to yell at Sabine at one point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. But she's like, yeah, because now it's like it's the whole balance and like all, that's why she was able to get contact the Purgle and do all those things and go in the well because it's like she's balanced now. And it really good. I think too, it's just like this series, it really is like when it's sort of like it's different from Andor in a sense as far as just some vibes and feelings, but as far as the way they have really structured the story now that we're more than we're on the back, going to be on the back three. All the little things, all the little details from early on where she was like speaking of where she was talking to Sabine about being balanced and stuff. I mean, those were, in a lot of ways, she was just talking to herself. And as you saw some of those things in Sabine that, that she was trying to, like you said, she was like imposter syndrome and trying to deal with herself. So now that she's free of all that, she can hopefully, she'll, she's riding fully with the Force, and wherever it takes us, I'm good. I'm going with it. as far as Ahsoka, and I guess we as the audience are on that same journey as well.
Yeah. Let's just hope Dave Filoni continues directing the rest of the episodes because you seem to you seem to really be on board with the episodes that he directs.
Well, this is only, well, I mean, he's written them all, but I think this one, but I think this particular episode, he needed to direct this episode because there is so much lore and so, it was digging so much into the animated universe. Well, not universe, but I mean, animated is part of the canon as well. But it was still, he was there, and he knows that stuff inside and out. That I think another director probably would have made a lot of different directing choices, and with the material. So I think it was important for Filoni to do this one. I don't know if he's directed any others this season. I have to look on the look at IMDb, but I think this particular episode, he needed, he had to do this one. I don't think he would have had the same effect. And maybe that's that. For example, last week's episode, it was good, but I think some of the things that, from the lore standpoint, that they were trying to get at, may have worked for you. It worked for you, and because you're primarily a live action watcher, but for someone like me, who a little bit more, I guess, looked at it a little bit more critical, but given my understanding of some of the, from watching the animated stuff, it kind of left me like, it was good, but I didn't, it wasn't mind blowing like where this week I felt like I had to use the Homelander.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, and I did watch the episode, and I like this episode. Like, I honestly feel the same way that I felt last week about both episodes.
Yeah.
And you're so much more passionate about this week's episode that I'm just like, Will's just going to talk and explain everything because I'm not going to do anything justice here. I don't know the lore that well. So, and because I felt like I talked a lot last week, I'm just like nothing surprised me. I wasn't like, oh, that's really interesting. I thought it was really clever. All of the subtle Anakin Darth Vader thing that happened. Yeah, I don't know. I really feel like I'm at a disadvantage in this conversation. Well, not a disadvantage. That's not the right word. I'm not. The more I elaborate on this episode, the more of a disservice I'm doing to the lore.
Okay. Well,
I think. I don't
yeah,
know if that makes any sense.
that makes total sense
I
because
really don't know.
I think no, I think that makes total sense because it's how I felt whenever we would talk about Return, House of the Dragon, and since I didn't have all the lore and everything from Game of Thrones from where you watched it, it's the same type of dynamic,
Yeah, no. I mean, I think you liked it in your man. I don't know. I'm not yeah. Sure. I guess so. I guess why I would say yeah and no is because I'm not I just because I watched Game of Thrones doesn't mean that like I never read any of the books. I
Right.
never did research online about it. So I don't I only know the story that was told through the show,
Mhm.
and as that is. So I'm not. I wouldn't. I would say I had a leg up, but I also didn't have like. Um, I wasn't a book reader and a Game of Thrones watcher.
Got it. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
So yeah. Ahsoka was good this week. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with this episode. I'm just there's times when I really want to talk about something, and there's times when I'm like, I'm not that passionate about this, so I don't know
Yeah. Fair enough.
what
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say.
No, this was yeah. That's totally fine. Like I said, I think I was there with episode 4 last week where I was just like, um, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I had a lot of say because there are times when you can feel passionate about something in a good way and passionately like this is where they fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.